The November wind cut through the broken windows of Iron City Dojo like a knife through old cloth. Frank MacAllister knelt beside the ancient heating unit, his weathered hands working with the practiced ease of someone who'd been fixing things longer than most people had been
I
alive.
told you to move
The
this rock.
radiator
Are you
coughed,
deaf?
sputtered, then
Don't
finally
you
hummed to
dare point
life.
your finger at me.
Same
I'm
model
not
since
afraid of you.
1985. Same problems. Same solutions. Hey, old man, you sure you know the difference between a wrench and a mop? Or do they all look the same at your age? Mac's hands stilled on the toolbox. He knew that voice. Brad Stevens, 32 years old, son of the gym owner and the newest instructor who believed traditional martial arts belonged in museums, not modern dojos. Mac had been cleaning these floors for 3 years now, keeping his head down, staying invisible. Just another old janitor in a city full of forgotten men. He stood slowly, his knees protesting after 20 minutes of crouching. At 62, the body didn't forgive like it used to. Brad stood in the doorway, designer workout gear pristine, holding court with a group of young fighters. Everything about him screamed new money, trying to play tough in a blue-collar city. "Just doing my job, Mr. Stevens," Max said quietly, gathering his tools. His voice carried the gravel of Detroit winters and too many years of silence. "Your job?" Brad laughed, turning to his students. "See this, guys? This is why you train hard. So you don't end up pushing a mop at 60, fixing heaters older than half the people in this room." The students shifted uncomfortably. Most were working-class kids from the neighborhood here on scholarships or scraping together monthly fees. They knew men like Mac, their fathers, uncles, neighbors, men who built the city with their hands and watched it crumble the same way. "Brad, ease up," the voice came from across the room. Rachel Thompson, 28, a lawyer who trained here evenings after defending the poor all day. Her father had run this place before Stevens bought it back when respect meant something more than Instagram followers. "What, I'm just being real, Rachel. This is motivation. You want to end up like—" Brad gestured vaguely at Mac, who was now organizing his toolbox with military precision. "Or do you want to be champions?" The front door chimed, and a 12-year-old girl rushed in from the cold backpack bouncing. Katie MacAllister, all freckles and determination, the spitting image of her late grandmother at that age. She ran straight to Mac. "Grandpa, Mom's stuck at the hospital again. Another double shift. She said I could wait here with you." Mac's weathered face softened. "Course you can, Katie Bird. Just let me finish up here." Brad's eyes lit up with fresh ammunition. "This your granddaughter janitor, cute kid. Maybe she should find better role models, though. Someone who actually accomplished something in life." Katie's face flushed red, but before Mac could respond, she stepped forward. "My grandpa's accomplished plenty. He just doesn't need to brag about it like some people." "Katie," Mac warned gently, but Brad was already laughing. "Oh yeah, what did he accomplish? Mastering the art of floor wax. Teaching advanced mop techniques. Jake Morrison, 45, a welding contractor built like a truck, set down his water bottle hard enough to echo through the gym. He'd been watching from the heavy bag, and something in his eyes said he knew more than he let on, but he stayed quiet, waiting. "Actually," Katie said, her young voice trying to sound tough, "Grandpa knows fighting stuff, real fighting stuff. He taught my mom when she was young, and she taught me some moves for when Bobby Chen tries to push me around at school." "The janitor knows fighting," Brad's voice dripped mockery. "This I have to see. Come on, old man. Show us these fighting moves. Just a friendly demonstration for the kids." Max shook his head, turning away. "I don't fight anymore, Mr. Stevens. Haven't for a long time." "Anymore?" Brad pressed, sensing blood in the water. "So you're saying you used to fight what bar brawls back in the 70s? Let me guess you were pretty tough after a few beers." The gym had gone quiet. 15 students, ranging from teenagers to middle-aged men, trying to reclaim something lost, all watched the exchange. In the corner, Jake Morrison pulled out his phone thumb, hovering over the record button. Something in the air had changed, like the moment before thunder. Mac looked at his granddaughter, saw the hurt in her eyes. Not hurt for herself, but for him. The same look her grandmother used to get when people looked down on Mac for choosing honest work over easy money. He'd promised himself 25 years ago he'd never step on a mat again. Never let that part of himself surface. But promises were harder to keep when family was involved. "All right, Mr. Stevens," Mac said, his voice carrying a different tone now. Not louder, just deeper, like an engine turning over after years of silence. One demonstration, educational purposes. But when we're done, you apologize to my granddaughter for disrespecting her family? Brad's grin widened. If you can last 30 seconds without breaking a hip, I'll apologize to whoever you want. Mac walked to the equipment closet, pulled out the old canvas bag he'd stored there 3 years ago when he started this job. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, were hand wraps yellow with age. He began wrapping his hands with movements so practiced they seemed automatic, each loop precise, each twist exactly where it needed to be. Jake Morrison straightened up, recognizing the technique. That wasn't how modern fighters wrap their hands. That was old school, the way they did it before elastic wraps and quick fixes. You actually wrapping up for this? Brad laughed, bouncing on his toes, showing off his flexibility. Afraid you'll break something? Mac didn't respond. He finished wrapping his hands, tested the tension, then walked onto the mat. His footwork was different from modern MMA fighters. Narrower stance weight distributed like a boxer from the golden age when Ali danced and Foreman stalked and Frazier pressed forward like a force of nature. Interesting stance, Grandpa. Brad circled him, hands up in a modern MMA guard. Where'd you learn that watching old Rocky movies? Rachel Thompson had moved closer, something nagging at her memory. The way Mac moved, economical, no wasted motion. She'd seen that before in old footage her father used to show her. Champions from before her time, when Detroit was the fight city, when Kronk Gym produced warriors, not influencers. Brad threw the first jab fast and technical, the kind that would score points in a modern bout. Mac didn't block it. He moved his head exactly 3 inches, left the jab whistling past his ear. No flinch, no overreaction, just perfect distance management. Lucky, Brad muttered, throwing a combination. Jab, cross, hook. Mac rolled under, the jab stepped outside the cross, and the hook found empty air. He hadn't moved more than a foot in total, but Brad was suddenly off balance, overextended. Son, Mac said quietly, your shoulder telegraphs, rises about an inch before you throw. Old habit from sport fighting where they don't punish it. Brad's face reddened. He came in harder, throwing leg kicks and combinations from his MMA training. Mac weathered them like a lighthouse in a storm, moving just enough, always just enough. Never retreating, never advancing, just existing in the space where Brad's techniques became useless. Katie watched with wide eyes. This wasn't the grandfather who fixed her bike and made Sunday pancakes. This was someone else, someone who'd lived another life before she existed. Then Brad made a mistake. Frustrated, he loaded up a haymaker, the kind of punch that looked good on YouTube compilations. Mac finally moved forward inside the arc of the punch and placed his open palm against Brad's chest. It didn't look like much, barely a push, but Brad flew backward like he'd been hit by a wrecking ball. He landed hard on his back, gasping, the wind completely knocked out of him. The gym exploded in whispers. Jake Morrison saved the video, already typing a caption. Rachel Thompson stepped forward, her lawyer's mind racing through implications. But it was Katie who broke the silence. Grandpa, she whispered, how did you do that? Mac helped Brad sit up the younger man's ego, more bruised than his body. It's called listening to your opponent, Mr. Stevens. Their body tells you everything they're going to do if you've got the experience to hear it. That takes years, decades. The kind of time you can't fast forward through with supplements and 6-week programs. Brad wheezed, trying to find words, but Mac wasn't done. You asked what I accomplished. I accomplished learning that real strength isn't about showing everyone how tough you are. It's about knowing when not to fight. I accomplished raising a daughter who became a nurse, saving lives every day. I accomplished being here every morning at 5 to make sure kids from the neighborhood have a clean, safe place to train. And today I accomplished showing you that old doesn't mean useless, and that maybe you should think twice before disrespecting someone just because they push a mop. Jake Morrison finally spoke up, his voice carrying across the gym. You know who this is, don't you? He held up his phone, showing a grainy photo from 1983. Frank the Phantom MacAllister, 5-time Golden Gloves champion, trained at Kronk with Thomas Hearns, undefeated in 43 professional fights before he retired. The gym went dead silent. Brad's face went from red to white. Rachel Thompson gasped, pieces clicking into place. Mac just stood there, looking older and more tired than his 62 years. That was a long time ago, Mac said quietly. Different life, different man. Why'd you quit? One of the teenage students asked, voice hushed with awe. Mac's eyes found Katie, then swept the room full of young faces. Because 25 years ago, I killed my best friend in the ring, Tommy Sullivan. We came up together, served in Vietnam together, fought side by side in Detroit's gyms. One day I hit him with a combination I'd thrown 1,000 times. He went down and never got up. Brain hemorrhage. They said it wasn't my fault that he had an old injury from the war, but when you watch your brother die from your own hands, fault doesn't matter much. He started unwrapping his hands, each movement deliberate. I swore I'd never fight again, never teach anyone to fight, just wanted to disappear, be useful in other ways. Fix things that were broken, clean up messes, simple work for complicated conscience. Brad struggled to his feet, one hand on his ribs. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something between shame and confusion. I didn't know. Why would you? Mac asked. I'm just the janitor, and that's all I wanted to be. But you pushed Mr. Stevens. You disrespected my granddaughter, made her ashamed of me. That's a line you don't cross. Katie ran to her grandfather, wrapping her arms around his waist. I was never ashamed of you, Grandpa. Never. Mac hugged her back, his weathered hands gentle. Around them, the gym began to stir back to life. But something had fundamentally changed. The students looked at Mac differently now, not with pity or dismissal, but with the respect earned through revelation. Jake Morrison approached, extending his hand. Corporal Morrison, 1st Marines, Fallujah, '04. It's an honor, Mr. MacAllister. My father used to talk about watching you fight at Cobo Hall. Said you moved like smoke, hit like thunder. Mac shook his hand, grip still firm. That man's been gone a long time, Corporal. Maybe, Jake said, glancing at Brad, who was sitting on a bench looking lost. But sometimes the world needs reminders that the old ways still have power. That experience means something. Rachel Thompson cleared her throat. Mr. MacAllister, my father was Robert Thompson. He ran this place before Mr. Stevens bought it. He had a photo of you on the wall from your last fight. He said you were the best he ever saw, and that Detroit lost something when you walked away. Your father was a good man, Max said. Trained good fighters. Honest ones. The conversation was interrupted by the front door slamming open. A man in an expensive suit walked in, followed by 2 younger men who moved like fighters. Antonio the Bull Torino, 65 years old, but still built like the heavyweight he'd been. His eyes found Mac immediately, and his face split into a predator's grin. Well, Frank MacAllister. I saw a video online, some old man embarrassing a loudmouth instructor. Had to come see for myself if the phantom had finally come out of hiding. Mac's body tensed just slightly, but Katie felt it. Mr. Torino. Been a while. 25 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Torino said. Not that I'm counting. You cost me a lot of money when you retired, Mac. I had investments riding on our rematch. I told you then I was done. Nobody's ever really done, Mac. They just think they are until the right motivation comes along. Torino's eyes found Katie. This your granddaughter, pretty girl. Shame if she had to grow up without her grandfather around. The threat was subtle but clear. Mac stepped forward, putting himself between Torino and Katie. Whatever you want, it doesn't involve her. What I want is simple. One fight. You and my boy Danny here. He gestured to the younger man on his left, 35, all muscle and modern technique. Call it an exhibition. For charity, of course. Detroit Youth Boxing. Unless you'd prefer I discuss with Mr. Stevens here about his mortgage on this place. I hold the paper, you see. Be a shame if the neighborhood lost its gym. Mac noticed the other Torino son standing slightly behind, uncomfortable with the proceedings. This would be Vincent Antonio's younger brother, who'd chosen legitimate business over the family's rougher dealings. The brothers rarely spoke, Mac had heard, but Vincent's presence here was curious. Stevens looked up confused and afraid. Mr. Torino, I don't understand. Simple business, Bradley. Your father borrowed from me to buy this place. You've been making payments to my company, but I'm thinking maybe this location would be better as condos. Unless Mac here wants to help me put on a show for old time's sake. Mac looked around the gym. Kids from the neighborhood who needed this place. Jake Morrison and other vets who found peace in the rhythm of training. Rachel Thompson carrying on her father's legacy in her own way. Even Brad Stevens for all his faults trying to make something of himself. I need time to think, Mac said. You've got a week, Torino said, turning to leave. Oh, and Mac, that thing with Tommy Sullivan, I knew about his condition. He came to me for money for treatment. I turned him down. Figured it would solve my problem with you if something happened to him. Guess I was right. The revelation hung in the air like poison gas. Mac's fists clenched the first real anger anyone had seen from him, but Katie's hand slipped into his, small and warm, and the rage dissolved into something colder, more focused. After Torino left, the gym was silent. Brad Stevens stood up, walked over to Mac, and did something no one expected. He bowed formally the way fighters used to show respect. Mr. MacAllister, I'm sorry for everything. I've been an arrogant punk disrespecting everything this place stands for. If you'll let me, I'd like to learn. Not just fighting, but what you know. What you've lived. Mac studied him for a long moment. You want to learn? First lesson is free. Real strength isn't about being better than someone else. It's about being better than yourself yesterday. Second lesson costs you humility. You'll train with everyone here as equals. No hierarchy except what's earned through sweat and respect. Yes, sir. And Brad, you owe my granddaughter that apology. Brad turned to Katie, dropped to one knee to meet her eyes. Katie, I'm sorry. Your grandfather is 10 times the man I'll ever be. I was scared of that, so I tried to tear him down. That was wrong. Weak. I hope you can forgive me. Katie looked at her grandfather, who nodded slightly. Okay, she said, but you have to promise to stop being mean to people just because they're different from you. I promise. As the gym slowly returned to normal training, Jake Morrison approached Mac. You know Torino won't fight fair. He never did, Mac replied. But this isn't about fair. It's about protecting what matters. He looked at Katie now, watching the students train with fascination. 25 years ago, I ran from who I was. Maybe it's time to stop running. Rachel Thompson overheard and pulled out her phone. If you're going to fight, you'll need legal representation. Pro bono, of course. My father would haunt me if I let Frank MacAllister face this alone. Brad Stevens joined them. And you'll need a training space. The gym is yours any hours you want. No charge. Ever. Mac looked at these people, most strangers, an hour ago now, rallying around him. This was Detroit. When the city pushed, its people pushed back. When one fell, others helped them stand. All right, Mac said finally. But we do this my way. Old school. No social media circus, no trash talk, no disrespect. We fight with honor, or we don't fight at all. Katie tugged his hand. Grandpa, will you teach me the real stuff, like you knew before? Mac knelt down, meeting her eyes. His voice was gentle but serious. Fighting isn't about hurting people, Katie Bird. It's about protecting what you love. If I teach you, you have to promise me something. Never throw a punch in anger. Never fight from hate. Only from love, only to protect. Can you promise that? I promise, Grandpa. Max stood looking at the faces around him. Son, he said to Jake, I've forgotten more about fighting than most people ever learn. But what I never forgot is this Detroit steel doesn't bend. It just gets stronger under pressure. As the sun set over Detroit, casting long shadows through the gym windows, Max stood with his granddaughter, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with him. For 25 years, he'd hidden from his past. Now, with Torino's threat hanging over everything he'd built in his quiet life, he realized some fights couldn't be avoided. They could only be faced with whatever strength, time, and experience had left you. The phantom of Detroit was stirring, and this time he wouldn't fight alone. The radiator hummed in the corner, steady and reliable like it had for 35 years. Some things Mac thought only got stronger with age. They just needed the right moment to prove it. The week that followed the confrontation at Iron City Dojo passed like a held breath. Mac went through his routines, arriving at 5 each morning to prepare the gym, but now students nodded respectfully when they passed. Some even asked questions about technique, about the old days, about fights they'd heard their fathers mention. Mac answered sparingly, focusing on his work, but something had shifted in the air of the place. Katie came every day after school, now doing homework in the corner, while Mac worked occasionally, looking up to watch the fighters train. She'd started a notebook writing down things her grandfather said, little pieces of wisdom, dropped between fixing equipment and mopping floors. On Tuesday, Jake Morrison stayed after his workout welding torch in his truck. That heavy bag mount's been loose for months, he told Mac. Let me fix it properly. No charge. Veterans look after each other. By Wednesday, word had spread through the neighborhood. Old-timers who remembered Mac's fight started dropping by. Bobby Cherwinski, who ran the corner store, brought coffee and stories about watching Mac fight at Cobo Hall in '82. You made us proud, Mac. When a Detroit boy stepped in that ring, the whole city stepped in with him. Thursday brought an unexpected visitor. A small elderly woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes walked in just as the morning class was ending. Mac was adjusting the ring ropes when he saw her, and his hands froze. Hello, Frank. Margaret. Mac's voice was barely a whisper. Margaret Sullivan, 70, now Tommy's widow. She looked older than her years, worn down by loss and time, but her eyes held no hatred, only a deep, endless sadness. Brad Stevens started to intervene, but Rachel Thompson caught his arm, shaking her head. Everyone in the gym seemed to sense this moment needed space, needed air to breathe. I saw the video, Margaret said, her voice steady. First time I've seen you move in 25 years. Tommy would have laughed, you know. Old Mac mopping floors, then showing some young hotshot how it's done. Mac stepped down from the ring, moving slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter something fragile. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Every day I'm sorry. I know, she said simply. I've known where you were for 3 years, Frank. Could have come sooner, but I wasn't ready. Needed time to figure out what I wanted to say. Katie appeared at Mac's side, instinctively protective. Margaret's eyes softened, seeing her. You look like your grandmother. Sarah MacAllister was a good woman. Visited me after Tommy died, even though you told her not to. We had coffee every week until she passed. Mac's eyes widened. He'd never known. 10 years of his wife meeting with Margaret, and she'd never said a word. She told me about you, Margaret continued. How you couldn't sleep. How you'd wake up screaming Tommy's name. How you gave all your fight money to charity and started working with your hands trying to fix things because you couldn't fix what happened. It doesn't change anything, Mac said. Tommy's still gone. Margaret reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope yellowed with age. I found this going through old papers last month. Tommy wrote it the day before your last sparring session. Never sent it. Mac took the envelope with trembling hands. His name was written on the front in Tommy's messy scrawl. Inside a single page, Mac, by the time you read this, it'll probably be too late to matter. Doc says the thing in my head from Vietnam is getting worse. Could go anytime. Taking pills that aren't helping much anymore. I don't want to die in some hospital bed, machines beeping, everyone watching me fade. If I'm going out, I want it to be on my feet, doing what I love with my best friend. Tomorrow when we spar, I'm going to push you. Hard. Harder than ever. Because if it's my time, I want it to be in the ring, not some sterile room. Don't hold back. Don't you dare hold back. And if something happens, it's not on you. It's on that piece of shrapnel from Tet that's been trying to kill me for 15 years. You're my brother, Mac. Always were, always will be. Look after Margaret if something happens. Tommy. Mac's hands shook. Katie read over his shoulder, understanding with wisdom beyond her 12 years. Margaret watched them both, tears finally coming. He knew, Mac breathed. He knew, and he didn't tell me. He knew you'd never fight him if you knew, Margaret said. You'd have babied him, treated him like glass. He wanted one last real fight with his best friend, and he got it. The weight Mac had carried for 25 years didn't disappear, but it shifted, changed shape into something that didn't cut quite as deep. Margaret stepped forward, put a weathered hand on his arm. I forgive you, Frank. More importantly, I need you to forgive yourself. Because Antonio Torino is the real villain here. Tommy went to him for help with medical bills. Torino turned him away, said Tommy wasn't worth the investment. Then he bet against you in that last fight, knowing about Tommy's condition. He's evil, Frank. And now he's threatening these kids' gym. Tommy would want you to fight. Not for violence, but for what's right. Before Mac could respond, the door burst open. Danny Torino strutted in, all swagger and modern muscle. At 35, he was everything his father had been at that age, plus 20 years of sports science and supplementation. Behind him came two more young fighters, and behind them, Antonio himself. "Time's up, MacAllister," Antonio announced. "What's it going to be?" "You fight my boy or I call in the mortgage tomorrow." Stevens stepped forward. "Mr. Torino, please. This gym means everything to the neighborhood." "Not my problem, Bradley. Business is business." Antonio's eyes were cold, calculating. "Unless Mac here wants to help me put on a show. Christmas charity event. The Return of the Phantom. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?" "What are your terms?" Rachel Thompson asked in her lawyer voice phone already recording. Antonio smiled. "Simple. Mac fights Danny. Boxing rules but modified. 8 3-minute rounds instead of 12. If Mac wins, I forgive the mortgage and the gym stays open forever. If Danny wins, Mac admits publicly he was never that good, just lucky, and agrees to never set foot in a boxing gym again. And if I refuse, then I call in the mortgage tomorrow, the gym closes by Christmas, and all these kids can find somewhere else to pretend they matter." Jake Morrison stepped forward, fists clenched. "That's extortion." "That's business," Antonio corrected. "So what's it going to be, Mac?" Mac looked around the gym, at the kids who'd lose their safe space, at veterans like Jake who found peace in the rhythm of training, at Brad Stevens who despite his flaws was trying to do better, at Rachel Thompson fighting to preserve her father's legacy, at Margaret Sullivan who'd lost her husband but still believed in standing up to bullies. Finally his eyes found Katie. His granddaughter stood straight, chin-up, eyes fierce with inherited pride. She nodded once, small but certain. "December 20th, Mac said. "Cobo Hall if you can book it, but I have conditions too." "Name them." "No press conferences, no trash talk, no social media promotion. This is about settling debts, not making money. All proceeds go to Detroit Veterans Fund and the Tommy Sullivan Memorial Scholarship for local kids. And win or lose, you never come near my family again." Antonio laughed. "Still trying to be noble, fine. Danny needs the practice anyway. He's got a title fight in March." He turned to his son. "Show the old man what he's in for." Danny stepped forward, stripping off his shirt to reveal a physique carved from modern science. He shadowboxed, his speed impressive, his power obvious. Then he moved to the heavy bag, unleashing a combination that made the chain groan and the ceiling shake. The display was meant to intimidate, and it worked on everyone except Mac, who watched with the detached interest of someone who'd seen hundreds of young fighters mistake flash for substance. "Impressive," Mac said quietly. "You train hard." "Every day," Danny boasted. "Twice a day. Nutrition optimized, recovery, maximized, technique analyzed on video. I'm not some old school brawler old man. I'm a machine built for combat." "Machines break," Mac observed. "People endure. That's something you learn when you build things with your hands, not in a gym with perfect conditions." Danny's face reddened. "We'll see who breaks Grandpa." After the Torinos left, the gym erupted in discussion. Everyone talked at once, plans and strategies and worries tumbling over each other. Mac raised a hand for silence. "If I'm going to do this, I need to do it right. Jake, can you help me set up a training schedule?" "Nothing fancy, just basics." "Roger that," Jake nodded. "I know a few other vets who'd want to help. Good people. Rachel, I need you to make sure everything's legal. No loopholes for Torino to exploit." "Already on it," she said, typing rapidly on her phone. "I'll have 3 contracts drafted by tomorrow." "Brad," Mac turned to the younger instructor, who straightened nervously. "I need you to find out everything you can about Danny's fighting style. Videos, stats, habits. You know the modern game better than I do." Brad's eyes widened. "You want my help? Everyone has something to offer, son. Your knowledge of modern MMA could help me understand what I'm facing." Margaret Sullivan stepped forward. "I'll help too. I've got Tommy's old training notes, his strategies for different fighter types. He always said you were the smartest fighter he knew, Mac. Time to prove him right." As people dispersed to their tasks, Katie tugged Mac's sleeve. "Grandpa, are you scared?" Mac knelt down to her level. "Terrified, Katie Bird. But sometimes the things that scare us most are the things most worth doing. That's another thing you learn when you've lived as long as I have." That evening, Mac stood alone in the gym after everyone had left. The ghosts were thick tonight, Tommy's laugh echoing from the corners, Sarah's voice telling him to be careful, the phantom pain of old injuries reminding him that 62 was far from 25. The heavy bag hung before him waiting. Mac hadn't hit anything with purpose in 25 years. He raised his hands, feeling the familiar position muscle memory stirring like a sleeping giant. He threw a jab. Slow, rusty, but the form was still there, buried under decades of deliberate forgetting. Another jab. A cross. The beginning of a combination he'd thrown 10,000 times. Each punch brought back more. The smell of Kronk Gym. Emmanuel Stewart's voice calling out corrections. Tommy's grin when they'd spar, both of them young and hungry, and convinced they'd live forever. By the time Jake Morrison found him an hour later, Mac was soaked in sweat hands, raw, breathing hard but moving. Not like the Phantom yet, but like something stirring to life. "Looking good for a fossil," Jake said, tossing him a water bottle. "Feel like one too," Mac gasped. "Everything hurts." "Good. Means you're alive." Jake pulled out a notebook. "I've been thinking about training. Danny's got youth, modern technique, and conditioning on his side. But you've got something he doesn't." "Arthritis," Jake laughed. "Experience. You've been in wars, Mac. Real ones, in and out of the ring. Danny's fought in controlled environments with rules and referees and safety measures. You know what it's like when everything's on the line. That's an advantage if we use it right." Over the next days, Mac's training became a community effort. Jake and his veteran friends set up a schedule. Rachel handled legal matters while reviewing old fight footage. Brad analyzed Danny's fights frame by frame, finding patterns and weaknesses. Margaret brought Tommy's notes and, more importantly, his spirit. The second morning, Mac arrived to find the gym transformed. Someone had hung old photos along the walls. Mac in his prime, Tommy grinning after a victory, Kronk Gym's champions. Detroit's boxing history lined the walls like guardian spirits. "Figured you needed reminders," Bobby Cherwinski said, arriving with his daily coffee delivery. "This city's got a fighting heart, Mac. Always has. You're part of that." Training was brutal. Mac's body protested every movement. Muscles that hadn't fired in decades screamed in revolt. His wind was gone after 2 rounds of shadowboxing. His timing was off, his reflexes dulled by age and inactivity. But beneath the rust, something remained. The way he distributed weight, the economy of motion, the ability to read angles and distances that came from 40 years of study. Brad proved surprisingly helpful. "Danny drops his left hand when he throws the overhand right," he reported, showing video on his tablet. "Just for a second, but it's consistent. And he favors his right leg. Old ACL injury from college football." "How'd you find that out?" Mac asked. Brad smiled sheepishly. "I may have done some deep diving on social media. His ex-girlfriend is very talkative after wine." By the end of the first week, word had spread through Detroit. The Phantom was training again. Old-timers started showing up, offering advice and sharing memories, creating an atmosphere that was part training camp, part revival meeting. Sarah, Mac's daughter, took time off from the hospital to help. At 35, she was her mother's daughter, but with Mac's stubbornness. "Dad, you're too old for this," she said while wrapping his hands. "I know. You could get seriously hurt." "I know." "Then why?" Mac looked at Katie, who was practicing footwork Jake had taught her. "Because someday she's going to face her own Torinos. And I want her to know that standing up isn't about winning. It's about standing up." "You sound like Mom," Sarah said softly. "She always said you were the stubbornest man in Detroit." "Second stubbornest," Mac corrected. "Tommy was worse. That's probably why we were friends." The second week brought intensity. Mac's body began remembering. The Phantom footwork returned in glimpses there, then gone like smoke. His jab regained some snap. His stamina improved from pathetic to merely concerning. Danny Torino made appearances, always with cameras, always talking. "Gonna put the old man to sleep," he told anyone who'd listen. "Phantom's about to become a ghost for real." Mac never responded. He just worked. 4 in the morning running the empty Detroit streets, 6 a.m. shadowboxing, 8 a.m. heavy bag work, afternoon strategy sessions with the team, evening light sparring with Jake and other volunteers. Nothing hard, just movement and timing. One evening, councilwoman Patricia Washington arrived. 68 years old, born and raised in Detroit, she'd been fighting for the city longer than Mac had been fighting in rings. "Frank MacAllister," she said, voice carrying the authority of someone who'd faced down corporate boards and won. "I remember watching you fight when I was young. You made us proud." That was a long time ago, Councilwoman. Maybe, but the city remembers, and the city needs heroes again, even old ones. Especially old ones. We've lost too much, Frank. Auto plants jobs, people. But we're still here, still fighting. Your fight with Danny isn't just about a gym. It's about showing that Detroit doesn't give up, doesn't give in, doesn't matter how old or tired we get. She handed him an envelope. Donation for the gym, from the city council's discretionary fund, technically for historical preservation. This place is history, and you're fighting to preserve it. That night, Mac couldn't sleep. He stood in his small apartment looking at old photos. His wedding to Sarah, Katie as a baby, Tommy in uniform. The ghost of who he'd been and the man he'd become were finally meeting, and the reconciliation wasn't comfortable. His phone rang. Unknown number. Mac, it's Vincent Torino, Antonio's brother. Mac tensed. He knew Vincent vaguely, the quieter Torino, the one who'd chosen legitimate business over his brother's gray areas. They'd been at the gym that first day, though Vincent had stayed silent. I'm calling to warn you, Vincent said. Danny's been training with some people. Not boxers, street fighters. Antonio's teaching him dirty tricks, things referees won't catch. Guard your ribs, Mac, and watch for headbutts that look accidental. Why tell me? Because my brother destroyed enough good things in this city. I won't let him destroy you too. And Mac, Tommy Sullivan was my friend too. What Antonio did to him was unforgivable. Beat his son for Tommy. The line went dead. The final week before the fight, Mac's training reached its peak. He was still old, still slow compared to his prime, but something had returned. The phantom movement was there in flashes. The ability to be where punches weren't. The gift of making opponents miss by inches that felt like miles. Brad had become Mac's most dedicated student, absorbing everything. You don't move like modern fighters, he observed during a session. It's like you're not trying to win, you're trying to survive, and that makes you harder to beat. Combat versus competition, Jake said. Mac learned in an era when boxing could kill you. Makes a difference in how you approach it. The young bulls come to prove something, Mac added, catching his breath between rounds. Old wolves, we've got nothing to prove. We just need to endure. Time is undefeated, but experience teaches you how to make time work for you, not against you. 3 days before the fight disaster struck, Mac was sparring lightly with a volunteer when he felt something pop in his ribs. Old injury from 1981, a crack that never healed right. The pain dropped him to one knee. Sarah was there in seconds, professional hands probing. Intercostal strain, maybe a slight tear. Dad, you can't fight like this. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Mac looked at the gym full of people who'd rallied around him. Kids who needed this place. Veterans who'd found peace here. A community that had made this their stand. No, he said quietly. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you're the only one who can stand between the bullies and the people who need protecting. That's not a choice. That's a responsibility. Margaret Sullivan approached with an old bottle. Tommy's liniment, his own recipe. Probably illegal now, definitely smells like death, but it works. That night, Katie found Max sitting alone in the gym, ribs wrapped, moving carefully through shadowboxing routines. Grandpa, what if you lose? Max stopped, considered. Then I lose with honor, and you learn that sometimes that's enough. But what if you win? Max smiled, the first real smile in weeks. Then an old man gets to prove that treachery and money don't always beat heart and history. Katie watched him move, seeing something she'd never seen before. Not her grandfather, the janitor, but the echo of who he'd been. The phantom of Detroit preparing for one last dance with violence. Teach me, she said suddenly. The real stuff. The things you know. Not so I can fight, but so I can understand. Max stopped, looked at his granddaughter. In her eyes, he saw Sarah's determination, his wife's compassion, and something else. Tommy's courage somehow transmitted through story and spirit to a girl who'd never met him. All right, he said. First lesson. Fighting isn't about your fists, it's about your feet. If you can move, you can survive. If you can survive, you can win. Watch. He began to move slower than his prime, but with the grace earned through decades. Katie followed, stumbling at first, then finding rhythm. grandfather and granddaughter dancing with shadows in a gym that had seen generations rise and fall. "Remember this Katie bird," Max said as they moved. "Every generation thinks the one before it is outdated. Every young fighter thinks the old fighters don't understand the new game. But iron sharpens iron, whether it's new steel or old. The principles don't change. Heart doesn't age. Will doesn't retire. And sometimes, just sometimes, the old ways are the best ways." Outside, Detroit's winter wind howled through empty lots and abandoned buildings. But inside Iron City Dojo, something lived. Something worth fighting for. Tomorrow would bring the fight. Tomorrow the Phantom would face his past and future in the same ring. But tonight, in this moment, an old man passed his knowledge to the next generation, ensuring that some lessons never die. They just wait for the right student to carry them forward. The morning of December 20th arrived with a snowstorm that blanketed Detroit in white, hiding the city's scars under pristine powder. Mac woke at 4, as he had every day for 40 years. But this morning felt different. His body ached in ways that reminded him of every fight, every year, every choice that had led to this moment. Sarah was already in his kitchen making coffee. Katie slept on the couch, having insisted on staying the night before the fight. Looking at them, Mac felt the weight of what he was about to do. Not the physical challenge, but the risk of failing them, of proving that sometimes the past should stay buried. "Dad," Sarah said quietly, handing him coffee, "you don't have to do this. We could crowdfund to save the gym. Start a GoFundMe." "It's not about the money anymore," Max said, testing his ribs. The pain was manageable, dulled by Margaret's liniment and sheer will. Torino made it personal when he revealed what he did to Tommy. "This is about justice. The kind you can't get in courtrooms." Katie stirred, immediately awake and alert. "Is it time?" "Not yet, Katie Bird. Fight's not until 8 tonight." "I mean, is it time for my last lesson?" Max smiled. Over the past week, he'd been teaching her the fundamentals. Not how to hurt, but how to move, how to think, how to see violence coming before it arrived. She was a natural, possessing the fluid grace some people were born with. "What do you want to know?" Katie stood small in her grandfather's old Kronk gym t-shirt that hung to her knees. "How do you not be afraid?" Max set down his coffee, knelt to her level. "You don't. Fear's natural, keeps you sharp. The trick is making fear work for you instead of against you. Tonight I'll be terrified, but I'll use it. Let it make me careful, make me smart. Brave isn't the absence of fear, Katie Bird. It's doing what needs doing despite the fear. Like when Mom works those long shifts at the hospital during emergencies." "Exactly like that. Your mom's the bravest person I know. She got that from your grandmother." The day passed in careful routine. Light breakfast, stretching, review of strategy with Brad and Jake. Rachel going over the contract one more time, ensuring no loopholes. The gym filled steadily with people. Old fighters, young students, neighbors, strangers who'd heard about the fight. By noon, Iron City Dojo was packed. Councilwoman Washington arrived with news. "Cobo Hall is sold out. 5,000 tickets. ESPN got wind of it, they're sending a crew. This isn't just local anymore, Frank. The whole country's watching." Mac's stomach tightened. He'd wanted this quiet personal, but Torino had other plans, turning it into a spectacle. Antonio Torino appeared at 2 p.m., swagger intact, Danny beside him, looking confident. Vincent Torino stood in the background, uncomfortable but present. "Hope you're ready for prime time, Mac. Lot of people about to watch you fall." "Is that what this is about?" Margaret Sullivan pushed through the crowd, voice sharp with decades of held anger. "Your ego. My husband died because you wouldn't help him, and now you're using his friend for entertainment." Antonio's smile faltered slightly. "Business, Mrs. Sullivan. Your husband wasn't a good investment." "He was a good man," she shot back, "which is more than you'll ever be." Danny stepped forward. "Look, no disrespect to your husband, lady, but this is between Mac and us. He wants to play hero at 62, that's on him." Jake Morrison laughed, harsh and sudden. "Hero, kid, you have no idea who you're fighting. This man earned a Purple Heart in Vietnam before you were born. Came home, built himself into a champion while working construction during the day. Never took a shortcut, never took a dirty dollar. Never compromised who he was for fame. You're not fighting an old man. You're fighting everything that made Detroit great." Danny's confidence cracked slightly. He'd prepared to fight a has-been. The narrative was shifting. Brad Stevens cleared his throat. I've been studying your fights, Danny. 28 wins impressive, but 17 were against carefully selected opponents, paid to lose or past their prime. The real fighters you faced, you won on points, playing it safe. When was the last time you were in a real war? Shut your mouth, Antonio snapped. My boy's a champion. Your boy's a product, Max said quietly, speaking for the first time. Built-in gyms with perfect conditions, optimal nutrition-controlled variables. Nothing wrong with that. But tonight he's fighting someone built in harder places. Vietnam jungles where 17-year-olds became old men overnight. Detroit streets when the city was burning. Rings where there were no weight classes, no safety nets, just survival. Your boy's about to learn the difference between sport and combat. Mac looked directly at Danny. You know what the difference is between your generation and mine, son. You were taught that losing meant failure. We were taught that not getting up meant failure. You can knock an old dog down. Question is whether he stays down. The words hung in the air. Mac hadn't meant to speak, but something about defending not just himself, but his generation, his city, his entire way of life, had loosened his tongue. We'll see, Antonio said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. 8 p.m., old man. Don't be late. Vincent Torino lingered as the others left. He caught Mac's eye, nodded slightly, a silent confirmation that his warning stood. Mac nodded back, understanding, passing between them. After they left, Mac retreated to the small office. He needed quiet, needed to center himself. On the desk was a photo Sarah had brought. Him and Tommy after winning their Golden Gloves, both grinning, both convinced they'd conquer the world. Next to it, Katie had placed a drawing. Stick figures, but clearly Mac standing tall, while a smaller figure fell. Above it, she'd written, Grandpa Shar's hero. A knock interrupted his meditation. Vincent Torino entered, looking tired. I've come to make you an offer, Vincent said. Walk away now. I'll pay off the gym's mortgage myself. Keep it open, fund it properly. You don't have to fight. Max studied him. Your brother know you're here. No, this is me trying to prevent what's coming. Danny's been trained to hurt you, Mac. Not just beat you, hurt you. Permanently. Antonio wants to destroy the legend completely. Then he doesn't understand legends, Max said. They're not about the man. They're about what the man represents. Win or lose tonight, I've already shown these kids something. That standing up matters. That bullies don't always win. That being old doesn't mean being finished. There's wisdom in walking away, Vincent pressed. There's wisdom in knowing when not to, Mac replied. A man spends his whole life building something, whether it's a reputation, a family, or just a small corner where kids can be safe. When someone threatens to tear it down, that's when you find out what you're really made of. Not muscle and bone, but will and purpose. Vincent sighed. You're really going through with this. I've been running for 25 years. A man gets tired of running. Vincent stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'll be rooting for you. Detroit needs heroes more than my brother needs victories. By 6 p.m., Mac was in the locker room at Cobo Hall. The place hummed with electricity. 5,000 people waiting to see if an old man could summon a ghost. Jake wrapped Mac's hands with the careful precision of someone who'd done it in Baghdad Fallujah places, where proper hand wrapping meant the difference between victory and medical discharge. How you feeling? Jake asked. Like I'm about to fight Sonny Liston with arthritis, Mac replied, earning a laugh. Brad entered with final intelligence. Danny's warming up. He looks confident but tight. His father's in his ear constantly. That's good. Means he's thinking instead of flowing. Rachel appeared with papers. All signed, sealed, legal. Win in the gym's safe forever. Lose and... She didn't finish. Then we lose, Max said simply. But we lose fighting. Sarah and Katie entered. His daughter's eyes were red from crying, but Katie stood strong, wearing an old Kronk gym hoodie, Mac recognized as his own from 1982. I'm proud of you, Dad, Sarah whispered, hugging him carefully to avoid his ribs. Mom would be too. Katie stepped forward with something in her hands. Mac's old boxing shoes, the ones he'd worn in his last fight. Margaret Sullivan had these. She kept them all these years. Said Tommy would want you to wear them tonight. Mac's eyes burned as he took the shoes. They were perfectly maintained polish, covering the scuffs but not erasing them. Each mark a memory, a battle, a moment when he'd been the Phantom. Thank you, Katie Bird. Mac laced up the shoes, each movement deliberate. You know what Tommy used to say? Mac, we're not getting older, we're getting seasoned. Like good cast iron. Takes years to build up that finish, but once you got it, nothing sticks to you. A official knocked. Mr. MacAllister, 5 minutes. The walk to the ring was surreal. The crowd roared seeing him, half cheering, half curious if the old legend could deliver. Mac saw faces he recognized. Fighters from his era gray now but eyes still sharp. Young kids from the gym holding signs. Detroit doesn't quit. Phantom forever. Old school rules. Danny was already in the ring bouncing shadowboxing, all modern energy and confidence. Antonio in his cornered expensive suit, treating this like a coronation. They'd brought their own officials, their own judges. This was meant to be an execution. Mac climbed through the ropes, moving carefully. The ring felt familiar, like coming home after a long journey. The canvas under his feet, the lights above the crowd noise fading to white static. This was where he lived his best and worst moments. The referee, imported from Vegas, went through the rules. 8 rounds, 3 minutes each. Modified boxing rules, clinching, allowed but limited. Protect yourself at all times. Danny grinned, mouthpiece making him look predatory. Ready to go night-night, Grandpa. Mac said nothing at first, then loud enough for only Danny to hear. Son, I've been in over 100 fights. Real fights where men went to the hospital or the morgue. You're about to learn that old age and treachery beats youth and skill every time. The bell rang. Danny came out fast, trying to end it quickly. Jab, jab, straight right. Mac moved his head slightly, the punches missing by centimeters. The crowd gasped. Even at 62, the Phantom footwork was there. Not as smooth, not as fast, but the essence remained. Danny threw combinations, technically perfect, powerful. Mac weathered them like he'd weathered life, giving ground but never breaking, rolling with impacts, minimizing damage. His ribs screamed, but he kept his face neutral. Never show pain. Never show weakness. Minute 2. Danny got confident, loading up a huge right hand. Mac saw it coming from a mile away, the same telegraph Brad had identified. Mac slipped inside and threw his first punch of the fight, a short left hook to the body. It wasn't hard by his old standards, but Danny's eyes widened. The old man could still crack. The round ended with Danny having thrown 50 punches and landed maybe 5 glancing blows. Mac had thrown one and made it count. In the corner, Jake worked quickly. Beautiful. He's already frustrated. Keep making him miss. Make him work. He's fast, Mac said, breathing steady despite the exertion. But speed is a young man's game. Timing is forever. Round 2, Danny came out more measured, trying to cut off the ring. He'd realized Mac wouldn't stand still and trade. This became a chess match. Danny using his youth to pressure Mac, using experience to escape. The Phantom lived in the spaces between violence, always where the damage wasn't. Then it happened. Danny threw a jab, pulled it short, and came up with an elbow. Textbook dirty, impossible for the referee to see from his angle. It caught Mac on the cheek, opening a cut. Blood flowed. The crowd booed, but the referee saw nothing. Antonio smiled from the corner. First blood, old man, Danny taunted. Mac spit blood, smiled for the first time. I've bled in 3 wars, son. This is nothing. You know what we used to say in, Nam, it ain't the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And this old dog's got a lot of fight left. Round 3, Mac began to push back. Not with power, but with precision. A jab that snapped Danny's head back. A body shot that made him grunt. Nothing fight-ending, but enough to show he wasn't just surviving. He was competing. The crowd began to turn. They'd come expecting to see an old legend get demolished. Instead, they were seeing a masterclass in survival, in technical boxing, in heart. Round 4 changed everything. Danny, frustrated by his inability to land clean, got reckless. He threw a wild overhand right, leaving himself completely exposed. Mac stepped inside and threw the combination he'd visualized 1,000 times. Left hook to the body, folding Danny slightly. Right uppercut to the solar plexus, driving air from lungs. Left hook to the head, not hard enough to knock out, but enough to scramble equilibrium. Danny stumbled, almost fell. The crowd exploded. The Phantom wasn't just surviving, he was winning. Antonio screamed from the corner, furious. Danny recovered, but something had changed. The confidence was gone. He was fighting an old man who shouldn't be this hard to hit, shouldn't hit this hard, shouldn't be smiling through blood like he'd found something he'd lost. "What's the matter, son?" Mac said, circling slowly. "Didn't they teach you in those fancy gyms that iron sharpens iron? Well, I'm old iron. Rusty maybe, but still sharp where it counts." Round 5 was brutal. Danny, desperate, now abandoned technique for aggression. He bullied Mac against the ropes, throwing everything. Some shots got through. Mac's ribs, already damaged, took punishment. His breathing became labored. The age showed now, the 25 years of inactivity catching up. But Mac had been here before. In Vietnam, when his unit was pinned down for 12 hours. In the ring with Killer Carson in '83, when his jaw was broken in round 2, but he fought 10 more. This was familiar. This was where he lived. He weathered the storm. Then, in the last 30 seconds of the round, he did something beautiful. As Danny threw yet another combination, Mac rolled under it and came up with the Phantom Special. The punch that had ended 20 fights. A picture-perfect check left hook, the one Ali had used on Foreman, the one Tommy had said was the prettiest punch in boxing. Danny didn't go down, but his legs betrayed him. He stumbled back, eyes glassy, saved by the bell. The crowd was on its feet, chanting now. "Phantom, Phantom, Phantom." In Mac's corner, his team worked furiously. His ribs were definitely damaged. His eye was swelling. Blood flowed from 2 cuts. At 62, his body was failing him piece by piece. "You can stop," Sarah said, tears streaming. "You've proved everything you needed to prove." Mac looked at her, then at Katie, who stood fierce and proud. Then at the crowd, 5,000 strong, believing in something they'd stopped believing in. That old could beat young. That experience mattered. That Detroit didn't die, it just waited for the right moment to rise. "2 more rounds," Mac said. "I can give them 2 more rounds. Sometimes that's all any of us can give. Not our best, not our prime, but what we have left. And sometimes what we have left is enough." Round 6 was a war of attrition. Danny recovered, but cautious, went back to technical boxing. Mac, feeling every one of his 62 years, fought on instinct and memory. They traded carefully, professionally, each looking for the one shot that would end it. With a minute left in the round, Danny clinched and did something unforgivable. He headbutted Mac, making it look accidental, opening another cut above Mac's eye. Blood poured, obscuring vision. The referee called time, had the doctor look. The doctor, clearly in Torino's pocket, shook his head. "I should stop this." The crowd booed viciously. Debris flew toward the ring. This wasn't sport anymore. This was theft. Mac grabbed the doctor's arm. "You stop this fight, this crowd tears this place apart. Let me finish. 1 more round. Let me finish on my feet." The doctor looked at the crowd, ugly and ready for violence, and nodded quickly. Round 7. The last round Mac would ever fight. He came out blind in one eye, ribs probably cracked, breathing through pain that would have dropped most men. Danny came out confident, knowing he just had to survive 3 minutes to win on the cards. But Mac had saved something. 25 years of suppressed violence controlled and channeled into 3 minutes of educated aggression. He walked through Danny's jab, accepting the damage, and got inside. Then he went to work. Body shots, the kind that don't look like much but shut down organs. Short hooks that twisted Danny's head. Uppercuts that lifted him slightly off his feet. Not the Phantom anymore, but something else. Something that had learned in harder places than rings. Danny tried to clinch, but Mac shrugged him off. Tried to circle, but Mac cut him off. Tried to trade, but Mac was inside his reach, inside his head, inside his soul. "This is for Tommy," Mac whispered, throwing a combination that had Danny covering up. "This is for every kid who needs this gym." Another combination, Danny backing up. "This is for showing my granddaughter that standing up matters." With 30 seconds left, Mac threw the combination he'd thrown the night Tommy died. The one he'd sworn never to throw again. But this wasn't about violence. This was about redemption. About showing that the past could be transformed into something else. Left jab to blind. Right cross to stun. Left hook to the body to drop the hands. Right uppercut to lift the chin. And then the finisher, the ghost punch, a left hook that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Danny Torino fell like his strings had been cut, not unconscious but unable to rise, body refusing to obey, watching an old man stand over him, with blood running down his face like war paint. The referee counted. The crowd counted with him. At 10, Cobo Hall erupted. Mac didn't celebrate. He walked to Danny, helped him sit up. "You're a good fighter, son, but you forgot something important. Boxing isn't about what you can do to someone. It's about what you can take and keep moving forward. That's what we learned in my generation. Not how to win pretty, but how to endure ugly." Antonio Torino entered the ring, face twisted with rage. "This is impossible, you cheated." The fix was in. "No," Vincent Torino said, entering from the other side. "The only fix was yours, brother. I've been recording your conversations for weeks. The bribes, the threats, everything. It's over." FBI agents appeared at ringside. Antonio's rage turned to fear, then resignation. As they led him away, he looked back at Mac. "You got lucky, old man." "No," Mac said quietly. "I got even. For Tommy. And luck's got nothing to do with it. Luck is for the young. Experience is for survivors." The next minutes were chaos. The crowd cheering, media pushing for interviews. Mac ignored it all, finding his family. Sarah and Katie rushed into the ring. He held them, finally allowing the pain to show, leaning on them as much as they leaned on him. "Grandpa," Katie said, "you did it. You won." "No, Katie Bird. We won, all of us. The gym, the neighborhood, everyone who still believes in earning things the hard way. Everyone who knows that just because something's old doesn't mean it's obsolete." Margaret Sullivan climbed through the ropes, tears streaming. "Tommy would be so proud, Frank. So proud." Jake Morrison and Brad Stevens helped Mac from the ring. In the locker room, paramedics waited. 3 cracked ribs, mild concussion, enough cuts for 15 stitches. Mac took it all without complaint. Pain was temporary. What happened tonight was forever. Councilwoman Washington entered with a check. The city council voted. Emergency funds to renovate Iron City Dojo. It's going to be a community center. The Frank MacAllister Boxing and Youth Program. If you'll run it. Mac looked at Brad Stevens. "I'm too old to run anything, but I know someone who's learned enough to do it right." Brad's eyes widened. "Me? But I was terrible to you. You were young and wrong. Now you're young and learning. That's all anyone can ask. Besides, every generation needs to learn from the one before it. That's how we keep the good parts and fix the bad." Later, after the crowds had gone and the lights were dimmed, Max sat in the empty arena with Katie. His face was stitched, his body wrapped, but his spirit was lighter than it had been in 25 years. "Grandpa, will you keep teaching me? Every day, Katie Bird. But not just fighting. I'll teach you what Tommy taught me, what Sarah taught me, what your grandmother taught me. That strength isn't measured in what you can do to others, but in what you can do for them." Katie leaned against his shoulder. Was it worth it? All the pain. Mac thought about Tommy, about Sarah, about 25 years of running and one night of standing firm. Pain passes, Katie Bird, but knowing you stood up when it mattered, knowing you fought for something bigger than yourself, that stays forever. That's the kind of strength that doesn't age, doesn't fade, doesn't retire. It just waits for its moment. Iron City Dojo was transformed. New equipment, fresh paint programs for kids, veterans, seniors. Mac taught morning classes for older fighters, showing them that age was just a number if the heart stayed young. Brad ran the evening sessions teaching MMA, but with old-school respect. Katie had her own group of young students teaching them movement and philosophy in equal measure. The photo on the main wall showed 2 fighters, Mac battered but standing after beating Danny. Next to it, Tommy Sullivan in his prime. Below a plaque, "Strength isn't about age, size, or skill. It's about standing up for others even when standing costs everything." Especially then. Danny Torino visited one day, humble, now his father in prison. "Mr. MacAllister, I want to apologize, and to ask if I could train here. Learn what real fighting means." Mac studied him, saw a young man freed from his father's poison. "Everyone deserves a second chance, son. First lessons free. Show up tomorrow at 5 a.m. That's early. Champions are built in the hours others sleep. That's another thing my generation learned. Success isn't about talent. It's about showing up when showing up is hard. As Danny left, Katie asked, "Do you really think he can change?" Mac watched the young man walk into Detroit's streets, shoulders straighter than when he'd arrived. Everyone can change, Katie Bird. Sometimes they just need someone to show them it's possible. That's what the old teach the young. Not just how things were, but how things can be. That night, Max stood in the gym alone, ghost pains from old wounds keeping him awake. But they were good pains, earned pains, pains that told stories worth telling. On the wall, fresh graffiti from a local artist. A phantom in boxing gloves, standing over a fallen city helping it rise. Below, someone had written, "Detroit doesn't die, it waits. And when the world counts it out, it stands up, dusts off, and shows everyone that some things get stronger with age. They just need the right moment to prove it." Mac turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked home through streets that seemed less broken than before. Behind him, Iron City Dojo stood solid and permanent, a reminder that sometimes the old ways still work. That experience matters, that standing up for others is the only strength that never fades. The Phantom of Detroit had one more fight in him after all. Not for glory or revenge, but for something simpler and more important. For showing a 12-year-old girl that heroes aren't just in stories. Sometimes they're janitors who mop floors and fix heaters, and when pushed too far, remind the world that legends never really die. They just wait for the right moment to rise again. And in a city built on comebacks where the old factories stood as monuments to what was and what could be, again, one old fighter had proven that the best steel isn't the newest or the shiniest. It's the steel that's been through the fire, beaten and shaped by time, and still holds strong when everything else breaks. MacAllister, the Phantom of Detroit, had given his city one last gift, proof that getting knocked down is just part of the process. Getting back up, that's what makes you a champion.